would love to do quick introductions because we envisioned this as a conversation for faculty. So you're going to notice that we'll just sit and be quiet once it gets going, that it's a way for faculty to share how they're using learning analytics. And it's wonderful that both UCF and UNC Charlotte are using Realizeit, also Canvas. So the conversation today might involve either of those or both of those platforms. So I'm Heidi Eccles. I am at UNC Charlotte in the Center for Teaching and Learning as an instructional designer. And I guess if it's okay, I'll say who's to the right of me and they can introduce themselves. So it's by you and you.
Okay, so my name is Bawin Chen. I am a senior instructional designer, also the program director of the Personalized Adaptive Learning from the University of Central Florida.
Ree, would you introduce yourself?
Okay. Oh, absolutely. My name is Ree Linker, and I'm a lecturer at UNC Charlotte, and I am the coordinator for our Stats 1222 program.
All right, and Tammy?
I'm Tammy Hughes. I'm a senior lecturer at University of Central Florida, and I'm in the mathematics department.
Wonderful. And Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca McNulty. I'm an instructional designer at UCF in the Personalized Adaptive Learning program.
Great. Alma?
Hi, my name is Alma Alarcón. I'm a senior lecturer in the Modern Languages department. I'm teaching Spanish.
Wonderful. And Casey?
Hi, I am Casey Tart. I'm also from UCF and I teach Spanish and Latin American Studies. I'm a senior instructor there.
All right, Evan?
Hi, I'm Evan Wantland. I'm a teaching professor in the math department and the director of the Math Pathways project here at UNC Charlotte.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne Pruka, and I am senior instructor at UCF. I teach Spanish and TESOL.
And Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Hosvon. I'm a professor in the Methodology, Measurement, and Analysis program at UCF, and I teach quantitative stats only at the graduate level, so master's and doctoral students.
Great. And Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Chojo-Rabel, and I'm an instructional designer for UCF that focuses on adaptive learning.
Kiran?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kiran. I'm the director for Personalized and Adaptive Learning here at our Center for Teaching and Learning at UNC Charlotte. And I also oversee faculty development and a media communications team for our university.
All right, and Juan?
My name is Juan Rabiatul Hontonjiwan Offman. I am a lecturer in the Math and Statistics department at UNC Charlotte, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. I think we'll just keep going to introduce everyone that's here. I know some people are here to observe. So Adriana.
Hi, everyone. I just came in here. I am Adriana Cejo from the Math department. I'm tenure track faculty member, but I was involved in the STATway work last semester. Such a nice group. Yeah. Nice to see everyone here.
Thank you. Archana?
Hi, my name is Archana Dubey, and I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Physics.
Great. And let's see, is it Hal?
Yeah. Hi there, I'm Hal Thayer. My camera's working. I'm an instructor in the College of Business, Integrated Business Department at UCF, and I teach small business development.
Great. Wow, we have so many wonderful people here and so many ideas I know are going to get shared. Okay, Jessica.
I already introduced myself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica.
It's okay. It's okay.
And so I think then, is it Romina?
Yes, it is Romina. I am a Spanish instructor.
Wonderful. Nice to have everybody here. And I know when we envisioned this forum that we really, again, wanted it to be this informal, open conversation. And so the format will be we did our introductions and welcome, and we want us to feel casual and open dialogue. So UCF is going to talk first, the faculty members that are going to present, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for question and discussion after they share some ideas. And then UNC Charlotte will present their ideas, and we can go into about 15 minutes of discussion and maybe move into 15 more minutes of wrap up questions, next steps, and takeaways. So we can start with, it looks like Archana, your slide is here from UCF. We can enjoy hearing from you.
Okay, so I have developed 2 algebra-based courses for personalized adaptive learning, but as I understand, we are going to talk about, this, what are the things we can look at as far as the students' data or the performance it is concerned. So I want to say that, my favorite part is to-do list, that is the main thing. If students, if they are not doing some students, usually they don't do the assignment on time, or they are delayed, it doesn't bother me much. But because I know they will do it, and in case they don't do it, then, it will reflect on their grades. So most of the students, they do it on time. But, my favorite part here, as I said, is to do list. And also, like, say, when students, when they flag the question, okay, it gives me information about, what misconceptions they have, because sometimes there is no error in the question, and students, they flag the question saying that there is some error in the question, like that. Okay, but it has happened that several concepts I have explained several times in the class, and still students, they flag the question. Okay, so one common error they make in physics is that, when they use sine and cosine function, they interchange that. Okay, some students are not sure when to use sine function or when to use cosine function. So this is the most common error students make. So it gives me information that how many students, they are still struggling with it. And also I can, in the class, I can talk about it. And if more, like if half of the class is flagging the same question, that means that I have to address that in the class. So, you may be surprised, we want students not to flag the question. We want that, that they understand everything and they're doing everything. But, I do like to look at this part when they flag the question, to know what they're, where they are not learning. And another thing is, like, say, in this part here, suppose that it is not, there is no error with the question. So in that case, I just skip it, so I don't give a message here, long message, that there is no error with the question, etc. Sometimes I leave a message that see the instructor if you need help, because I don't want to make this part like very tedious or anything. I do want to look at students, where they have problems, etc., where they have flagged the question. But still, while responding to the students, I keep it simple and tell them that you should come and, see the instructor if you need any help. And one positive point about flagging the question is, you will be surprised to know this, that, one positive point is that sometimes indeed there is error with the question. It has happened a couple of times, because these questions, we are entering these questions, okay, or when I provide questions to Bywin, okay, there may be some mistake from my side also. So that is, it has happened a couple of times that, there is error with the question. And in that case, I have the opportunity to correct that error so that other students don't come across it. So this is one thing. And all right, other things, as I said, I'm more interested in looking at flagging the question. Other things, yes, I'm interested. I look at how many students, they are working ahead, who are ahead, and how many students are not working. So in that case, I can make an announcement in the class that, look, you should do it in the timely manner. And also getting information about, like, say, for some particular question, how many students are correct or how many students are not correct. That also gives information about the difficulty level of the question. So yes, this, and then how much time they are spending. When I look at, this very little time, like, say, if they are spending very little time, it bothers me a bit. But since it is a multiple choice question, so it is possible that they don't have to spend much time on that. So these are some of the things I wanted to talk about. My favorite part, as I said, is when students flag the question. I love to see that. I want to see what they are doing. Indeed, if there is error with the question or not. So it gives us opportunity to correct the question immediately. This is the positive point of this.
I'm going to throw out there that I like to do the question flagging, just because you can answer that student individually and be like, I see that you're on the right track, but you didn't round your answer correctly, right? So it gives you that individual feedback right away, which is super cool.
I agree with you that we can give individual feedback, like just as I said, no, I don't want to make it more tedious, because if there are there is a large enrollment class, that is when it becomes really difficult to answer the question. And sometimes when I'm typing or if I'm answering the question, it can be misinterpreted. That is one thing. So usually I leave the message that, see the instructor, or yeah, no, there is error with your answer, something like that. But I keep it like little bit quick,
So this semester has been a really interesting semester. I've been working with Realizeit for a number of years. I have 2 courses, an algebra course and an intermediate algebra course. And it was set up with all original content. But I had some special challenges this semester and thought that I'd have to really kick it up a notch to address it. So what happened? So in spring of 2022, last year, my enrollment in my college algebra class was 47. Now it was typically 40, but there were 7 people on the waiting list. And my chair said, hey, is it okay if we let them in? And I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And I mean, I was loving it. I had solid connections with each of my students. I knew their names, I knew their faces, I knew their interests, because we did a whole introduction at the beginning of the semester. And I was able to provide them personalized instruction and assistance, not only through the system, but just through my connections with them. And part of that connection was built by these 3 one-on-one meetings I had with each and every student. And they were scheduled, it was planned to be about 10 minutes, but some of them hung out with me for a half an hour, 40 minutes. And so it was quite an interesting experience. And they all mentioned that it made them feel more comfortable with their online course because they knew me as an instructor instead of just virtually. So let's go to this semester. So my chair asked me, can you maintain your success rate if I raise your enrollment? It was a little bit of a loaded question. And of course, I gave the whole, well, the enrollment numbers really don't dictate the success rate. It's the student's effort that is in control of that. And so this is what happened. I started out with 40 2 weeks before the semester. He raised it to 60, and then he raised it to 80. And then by the start of the semester, my class enrollment was 160, which was a 300% increase over what I was used to. So that's why I was thinking, holy crap, what am I going to do? How can I make this work? So I knew I couldn't do my meetings that I loved. I mean, I enjoyed them and I learned so much from them. The students, I learned how I could individually help my students. And so I thought, well, I've got to have some way to make a connection other than, I did my morning on the first day of the semester. I did a sunrise video and stuff because I live at the beach and it was convenient and it was pretty. But, what am I going to do now to keep it going? And so I gave them a progress check-in quiz, and it did count as one of their class activities. And I asked them these 4 questions. I learned question 2 was pretty lame by the time I was done reading all their responses. But what are you struggling with? in the assignments thus far. What's your plan to prepare for test one? Test one is taking place this week. So it covers the first 5 weeks of the semester. And how are you doing? Is there anything I should know to be able to help you? Would you like to meet me via Zoom? And I thought a personal invitation to meet with me would be, extending a reach out there. And how are you doing? I expected them to answer in regards to the class. I was really pretty surprised at what I got. So the student response, one of the things that I found with what are you struggling to understand, it was the interface concerns. Well, I don't know what score is getting entered into the grade book, even though I had given them the whole how is your score calculated. They weren't getting the fact that they missed the fact that it was their composite score. So it gave me an opportunity to address that. The test preparation plans, some of them, they were just simply going to read over all their notes. And anyone that teaches math knows that reading over notes is not the way you study for a math course. You study for math tests by doing problems and practicing. So I was then able to address that. And they had some personal concerns as well as their learning concerns. So how I addressed it was I did a 2 to 6 minute video comment on the assignment, and that's a functionality that Canvas has. You can do an audio or a video. I'm not a big fan of making videos, but my students love them. And so I take one for the team there. If it'll help them, I'm willing to do it. So I did these 2 to 6 minute comments. And I say 6, there was one that was actually 10 minutes, but that was because it was necessary for that particular student. But in general, it was 2 to 6. And I certainly addressed extra resource opportunities, and that could address their question 1. What are they struggling with? For question 3, I stressed the best ways to study for a math test. And of course, I was encouraging, oh, that's a great idea. I'd also like you to consider doing some extra practice problems, and this is how you do it and realize it. And some of them, I had students that said that they had recently hit rock bottom in their grief and depression. And we have a program called UCF Cares, and I was able to put in their video, would you like me to make a referral for you? And she responded back, oh yes, please do that. That would be wonderful. And so I was able to address both course and personal things that they shared with me. Now, what was the response? It totally blew me away. Within 24 hours of receipt of their messages, 31.8% had spent a good deal of time getting caught up and improving their assignment scores. Now, why is this amazing to me? Because I go in and I update their scores every day. And I always look and see how many scores I'm updating. Oh, I'm updating 2 today for 2 different students. I had 31.8% of mine and the 24 hours earlier I had updated, so I was all caught up. So that's how many of my students actually got involved and engaged and started addressing some of their some of their concerns. So that was phenomenal. I actually had some of them say, I was about ready to drop out of the course, but I know you care. So I'm gonna stay in and I'm gonna work hard. So it was extremely exciting to me. So question query. Yeah, my students query questions. And I started telling them, hey, can you leave a comment? We never used to have the leave a comment option in query questions. But now I'll show them this screen and say, add a comment, let me know what your question is, because just querying it, is it that you think your answer is correct? Is it you don't know where you've gone wrong? This will help me be able to assist you. But then they'd send me a message, oh, I queried a question, and then I'd go to week 5 and I didn't see it. All right, so yeah, they said they queried it, but I haven't gotten anything from them. And at the beginning of the semester, it was always frustrating to me that sometimes the queries, I'd miss them. And at the end of the year, whenever I was going through week by week to check, I would notice, oh, there's a missed question that that a student had queried. And so I found out what to do to resolve that. So now whenever I go to check my queries, I go to the college level. So I have it circled here. This is what I would typically see if I click on the actual module, the assignment. So instead of answering queries from there, the first thing I do is I go to the college level, and then you click on the blue. And sure enough, this is something that was queried from the first week. My students are allowed to go back and rework their problems and improve their scores. And so this way it allows me to give more timely responses, because I'm not just worried about this week. I'm able to easily see, and it shows up on my to-do, and I can go ahead and answer them. So that was kind of like a gem that I learned, so I could find queries of things other than the week I'm actually looking at. Something else, we just another instructional designer and I just finished an article, and we were talking about learning hours, and I never knew that I could find the learning hours by objective for my class. It's a course level, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, you know, this is interesting. And this peak right here was word problems, and then the learning hours really dropped. And this peak was even harder word problems, and then it really dropped. And so looking at it, week 3 was 453.95 hours on that assignment my students had spent. But then on the next assignment, which is a reasonably hard assignment, they were only spending 138.85 hours. And so this has informed me as to, wow, do I need to consider reorganizing my objectives when possible? Should I make certain, you know, week 4 was a difficult concept for some of them. Should I try to put one of the easier concepts in afterwards? So whenever they're burnt out from a heavy duty learning objective, should I make it a little easier on them? Or should I consider dividing the harder ones that are taking too many learning hours into 2? And so that's something I'm going to be evaluating for my next go round. And then this questions at the student level. So, you know, we can look at the student level and we can see a question and see what they answered, and you know, if they got it correct and such. And so here's a student that I had to look at this information for, and this was after my semester at the end of winter or fall semester. And what I found was this student in 6 seconds was able to answer this question, and he didn't have a calculator based on his room scan. I use HonorDoc since it's all online. He didn't have a calculator, so he was using the HonorDoc's calculator. So I could tell he had never used a calculator. HonorDoc flagged him as having an academic integrity issue with his test, flagged it so heartily that they actually sent me a message that said, hey, this student cheated. And so I was looking at it, and his response was that he actually remembered the exact answer to that question because he had had it in one of his homeworks. So I went back and I was able to see every single time he had that particular question. And sure enough, he had never been given that exact question, yet he was able to come up with a negative 1.6. Now, that's partially correct. He just didn't round, well, he didn't round properly at all, but it was able to support an academic integrity concern. Now, that's a negative way that I was able to use it, but a more positive way is whenever a student's really struggling with a question, I can type a question, I can look and I can see the mistakes that they made throughout. And I can look for a repeating error.
Okay, so I am seeing my slide and I'm going to take that as it's my turn. So it occurred to me, listening especially to Tammy about how we use these different tools. And it's interesting to see how a mathematician uses them as opposed to a language teacher. And not that I don't look at the numbers, because I do, but I have found, and I can make a connection with her talking about student wellness and things like that, that a lot of the things that I focus on have to do particularly with maybe how the students are doing, how they're feeling. And because all of my classes are fully online, making those connections and having community in my classes is really, really important. So smooth sailing, or I'm having a problem. The first thing that I look at, and I know my colleague Anpruka is going to talk a little bit about the emojis, so I won't belabor them, and I'll let her talk about them. But that is something, that from the very first semester that they became available and Realize It, I remember reaching out to Anne and saying, have you looked at these? The students are using them. Why in the world would we have emojis in our class? But that has been one of the main things in the analytics that we have used to be able to reach out to students individually and say, what's going on? And a lot of times it may be the content or it may not. So that's the little bit I'll say about that. And she can speak to that a little bit more. So learning a language takes time. And students want to master the concepts immediately. And I'm sure you guys, see that in your class as well that aren't language classes, but, they'll write and they're panicked and I don't understand this. And I'll say things like, well, how long did it take you to learn English? And they laugh, because of course we're not masters of the English language. Some of us, we could argue never are, but I'll tell them, how, with your native language, how long did it take you? And then they laugh. Okay, well, years, okay, so in 15 weeks, we're probably not going to be fluent. And so I take a look at how long they've spent in the module. And if I see, and you can see to the left, my students' times, and then, just a subset of them and the ones that have gone back in. So you'll see at the due date, I leave my modules and Realize It open the entire semester because I don't want the content cut off from them. If they need to go back and review something, or if we learn a new concept in Spanish and they need to go back and take a look to kind of reinforce what we're learning, I always tell them it's kind of like a pyramid. You don't want holes in it or it's gonna, fall down. We need a foundation. So I look at time on task and I say, well, you spent 20 minutes on that lesson. Again, let's talk about this again. How long did it take? How long does it take you to learn a language? And so I encourage them to keep going. And I draw their attention to their time on task since I am available, have the ability to see that. And I tell them, try again. And so even in this image, you can see where they've gone back and they've spent, more time. Some of their scores have gone up, sometimes they go down, but that's when I talk to them about, if you're going to revise your score, there's a chance that it's going to go down, but keep practicing, or discard your progress. And our instructional designer, Jessica, is on the call and she, gets an email from Anne and I every now and then. And we're like, again, is there a clearer way to tell these kiddos, like, if you're going to revise, there's a chance that it's going to go down. So you have to keep practicing, keep trying. And then I just tell them, keep going, have another go back to it. And, need to know, to kind of piggyback on what Archana was saying, this is another one that I really like to see, who's working behind, who's having problems, if intervention is needed. And on the other side of that, sometimes students need things that are supplemental as well, because we have students coming in at all levels who've already had experience in the language. And so then there's things sometimes too that we can offer to them, because it can happen that a student will get so bored as well in your class that they kind of drop off or they stop doing things. UCF is a Hispanic serving institution. And so we have a lot of students who are heritage speakers of Spanish or come from families or who have just lived in communities, you know, here in Florida where they've been really exposed to Spanish. And so, you know, to try to keep interest in the course too, you know, that there are things that we can look at. You'll see in the bottom right item with high success. I look at those too to kind of see, like, is this something that, you know, isn't too easy, but is there a way that I could challenge the whole group a little more? And then the flip side of that is if students are getting everything wrong, I think, okay, is this the way I wrote the question? Is there another possible answer? Is it simply because they aren't putting punctuation in on a complete sentence and the system is marking them wrong? And so finally, because I'm trying to be brief, again, with the send message at the bottom where I do see a student working ahead or specific problems, to reinforce that community and connection with my students. And it doesn't take me very long. And sometimes I'll be honest, I just copy paste the same message for all the students that are working ahead, you know, like, wow, you're doing awesome. So glad to see you working so much and Realize It. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. I'm so proud of you, you know, keep going. And I always leave the box clicked that says that I expect a response. And I have had so many students, this is one of the ones I've started using just in the past couple of semesters. And so many students respond and they're like, thank you so much for writing me. It makes me feel really good to know, you know, for them to know that we're seeing their progress, that we're looking at what they're doing. And the same thing has been the case with students who are struggling. You know, I'll send a message, and again, it might be that same copy pasted message, but then they reach back out and they say, you know what, I am having trouble. I don't understand this. I don't know why. And then we can schedule a Zoom meeting, or maybe I can just solve it right there via email. But that send message has been a really good one for me too. And there's another, I didn't take a screenshot of it, but there's another option where you can reassign the assignment and it will send them back through the learning path for that particular. So let's say in our Spanish learning path, maybe we're doing AR verbs, and then from AR verbs, we're going on to whatever. So if they had specific trouble conjugating those AR verbs, I can click and just reassign it to them and encourage them to go back and continue to practice. So that is my 2 cents for the analytics. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and continue. Hi, everybody. Some of what I'm going to say overlaps with what Casey talked about. The first thing is, again, the emojis. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. So I'm just showing a different view. Using the emojis, there are 4 emojis. Students can choose how they're feeling. Not all students use this feature, but I find that the majority of them do. So then what I do on a regular basis is I go in and I look at the emojis, and where I see students who are unhappy or frustrated, I send them a message. I don't do it here though, I do it in Canvas. And they're always very pleasantly surprised. Sometimes they've just hit the emoji by accident and they didn't really mean to, but still it's a way for me to connect with them. And but when they have checked the unhappy or frustrated emoji on purpose, they're always, you know, really forthright in what their problems and their challenges are. So then I can offer some suggestions and then always go back afterward to see how they're doing based on my suggestion. So that's just a way to really communicate with my students and have connections with them, because I too teach these classes fully online. Wait a second, let me go back. Okay, so this here, this shows the learning path. Okay, so of course I can see right here, you know, how people are doing. If I see the red or the orange, I can know that that's going to be where students are having the most struggles. A lot of times, so this actual module was on pronouns, and there are tons of pronouns in Spanish. They're used with the verb gustar and verbs that function like gustar. So it's very confusing. It's very difficult. So it doesn't surprise me at all that I see these colors here. And then again, a lot of the unhappy and frustrated emojis were a definite result of the struggles here with pronouns. And this is just another way for me to see the analytics on the emojis. So the blue shows that, you know, this many students are happy, the black shows this many students are content, and then green and orange are unhappy or frustrated. So actually the numbers are pretty good, but this allows me to reach out to individual students, and they always really appreciate that. And then the other thing I'm going to talk about just really briefly is this analytic. I really like this overview where I can see who has completed. So this is one module, okay, or one chapter, one lesson, las celebraciones, whatever you want to call it, chapter, module, lesson. So I can see that this number of students, this many students have completed the work and then we've got this many students are currently working where the black is, but then where the green is, it shows that these students have not done the determined knowledge. So that gives me information on whether or not they've actually done the prelim questions to find out, you know, where they need to go in this chapter based on what they bring to the table. And also too, this is really helpful too. These students are finished. This is just another way to see it. So this gives me the actual numbers. And again, I can drill down and see who the students are that have not done determined knowledge. And I can contact them and just find out what's going on. So again, another way for me to connect with my students and communicate with them in the online environment, which I think is really, really important. Here also, this is the last one, and it overlaps a little bit with what Casey said. I've had students contact me to say they're struggling with a concept, or they got a really bad grade on a quiz, or they did really poorly on the Realize It practice activities for a certain chapter, and it can be anything. And then, you know, based on the interaction and how the student's been performing, I will actually, before I reply, I will go and see how much time the student spent in that lesson and Realize It. And a lot of times the student has spent 20 minutes, 10 minutes. And this student spent 7 hours and 25 minutes. This student spent 2 hours and 20 minutes. This is pretty good because I do have students who've spent, just last week, I emailed a student, he was struggling, he wasn't happy with the grade. And I went back and I found out that in the first 2 lessons or chapters or units, he had spent a total of something like 18 minutes in Realize It. So I very nicely explained to him, again, this is where the content for the course is. We do not have a textbook. You know, here are some things you can do. You can revise, you can practice. I encourage you to go back through the content and spend more time. So that's it. That's how these are just some of the analytics I use. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I know that the UNC Charlotte faculty are interested in seeing what everybody's doing. And this is where maybe we can open up a conversation, even, you know, a UCF colleague asking another colleague just to talk about how we can use these to help our students be the most successful, and what you're finding and what you've shared with us about. All of yours are about Realize It. So using the Realize It analytics. So this is our open conversation, and ask questions of each other, and feel free to take the mic, or if you're not comfortable doing that, you can certainly put it in the chat and I can moderate those questions as well.
I have a quick comment that I want to know why you guys just have 4 emojis. We have 6. So
that's a good question. And, you know, when I was preparing these slides for today, I did look at that. I thought, well, there could be some other ones. I mean, you don't want to go crazy and have 100, but what are the other 2 that you have?
Well, I think it's funny. The only one we have in common is frustrated, which is pretty good. So let me pop up and Realize It here. We have focused, anxious, bored, confused, frustrated, and unsure.
Okay. Nice. Well, we'll have to ask the Realize It folks.
Yeah, you should get more emojis.
I know the answer to this question.
Okay.
Partly my fault. When we worked with Realize It for the UCF team a few years ago, when we started doing this, we were invited to take part in a research study with some faculty or research teams with Cornell. Now you remember. And they were examining how different sentiment analysis would lead to student behaviors and interactions in the platform. And so we've always had this additional layer of more granular emotion states rather than the more general that Realize It has. But if you were interested, by when it's just a emotional state framework they can turn on tomorrow. So if that even matters.
Just more, you just feel more at UNC Charlotte. UCF are like very run-of-the-mill emotions.
It's nice to see that they're bored if they're bored. At least that clarifies that.
Maybe we don't want to find out.
I know, you don't know what you don't know yet. And there's more, just so you know, the researchers that are continuing the study have like a whole bunch of them, but we didn't want to complicate this for students because students are the ones self-selecting those. So when you have 10, it's hard to make a decision. So it was just 6.
I'm interested to note some of the differences in the way that Realize It is set up, probably even between the different courses at UCF, but also, you know, so we control in our course the way the Realize It grades go back into Canvas in such a way that there's a due date. Once the student hits that due date, their score goes from Realize It to Canvas automatically. And then from that point on, if they do extra practice, their grade in Canvas can never go down. So if their grade might go down and Realize It, because if they get a bunch of questions wrong, their grade will go down and Realize It, but only the improved grades will ever get transferred back into Canvas. So I just think it's interesting the way we have things just set up differently. We also at one point, and this is a decision that I'd like to undo, for 1222, we removed the ability for students to flag questions. And so I had found that to be something that I was using, but once we had decided there were no more questions that had errors in them, we removed that functionality. It's time to put it back, I think.
Just to add to Ree's comment about the flag, we used to have that, and sometimes you can have like 50 flagged questions or 50 messages from students, and because like to me personally, when I see that, I feel like they want my personal response, and I feel that's like an additional task for me to do. That's the main reason why we stopped doing that, right, Ree? Like to having to respond to each one of them individually, like why your answer is incorrect and what you need to do to fix it. And most of them is due to rounding, which we end up just addressed it in class. So just not to be rude to students, we just decided not to flag anything so that they don't feel like we're not responding to their flag questions or query questions.
Is that something we could set up so that 1 or 2 students looked at all those questions, or do they have to come straight through the instructor dashboard?
I think when you click on the course, that's the first thing you see if they are query questions. Because it goes to the to-do tab, and that's the first thing you notice if student had any questions, or usually they just want to know why they got it wrong, and they feel like they know they did it right and why they got it wrong.
Our peer our preceptors, our peer helpers in the classroom, as far as I know, they currently are seeing Realize It the way I'm seeing it. When I look at my preceptors interface with Realize It, they're seeing that. So this is something that we could potentially delegate as an option.
Okay, thanks.
I can definitely see different instructors reacting the query questions differently depending on the class size. Jana is teaching 2 physics courses, physics 1 and physics 2. The smaller class size is 100. The bigger one is several hundred. So I don't think she wants to spend too much time sending individualized feedback to her 500 students.
Any other comments or ideas to share before we hear from the Charlotte faculty?
Is the chat bot going to be able to handle questions from 500 students?
It won't even let me in right now. It's at capacity. So
I'll chat with you sometime, Heidi, if you want.
I had a question for the UCF faculty. You know, I'm curious, there are different roles you can play when you go into Realize It. Are any of you exploring the administrator roles where you could look at reports differently from how you would look at the analytics that you see as instructor?
I have not.
Okay.
I haven't either.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are pulling reports for different courses. And so we will have our instructional designers contact the instructors to share reports with them. But right now, they are not trained to pull reports themselves.
Okay, so it's your CTL, your instructional design team that looks at the administrative reports module. Okay, and we are not doing it either. I was just curious if that's something that was going to be helpful or what would be helpful, and we've been thinking about that for a bit. But clearly, it's a very complicated menu. I think Rhea has seen some of it before, but you know, thanks for clarifying, Baywen.
And Rhea was just talking about the schedule to send grades back. So actually, that's the same schedule that most of our classes are scheduled like that as well. I think except Debbie's course has a different schedule that students don't get their grades sent back after the due dates.
I did an experiment one semester where it was always updating. And so their grades would go down, they'd go up, etc. I did that for one class, and then the other class, I kept it where only improved grades would be entered into the grade book. And the reason I had it where it was, where it could go down is those students, they took an exit exam at the end of the semester, but they didn't have any other high stakes tests all semester. And I used the adaptive learning grade as their course grade.
Okay.
I mean, it might be partly a function because I teach grad students, but I have the grades set up so that they post once the deadline passes. They can continue to work and realize it, but their grades won't refresh after that point. I also want to encourage them to be accountable for it's due when it's due, and not to have it kind of as a crutch that they can continue to work on it throughout the semester, because what I don't want to happen is then at the end of the semester, they've barely done enough to get by. And then they realize I need to do a lot of work at the end of the semester, and they have a big project at the end. So I kind of want to have it's due when it's due. And then you need to look at what else remains, not look back to what can you do on what you've already finished.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if there's no other ideas right now, we'll hear from the UNC Charlotte faculty. And again, if you think of something and you want to put it in the chat, we can certainly get to that as well. And Rhea is going to start us off.
Yanjma and Juan and Jennifer and I, who all have slides to share, though Jennifer couldn't be with us. So we're going to go over her slides anyway, but we're all part of the STATways program at UNC Charlotte. So this is a coordinated statistics course that is introductory, and it's for the social sciences. And this course was redesigned in 2019, and that's when we started working with Realizeit. And it started with a collaboration between the mathematics and statistics department and kind of our partner programs. So those social sciences, we all met together in a room and said, okay, what is it you guys are expecting our students to know when they arrive in your classroom, and how are we doing? And it was quite a revelation for everyone. So that was a really good place to start. And we discovered that we needed to work on a more concept-based paradigm, where instead of focusing on, we're going to teach you how to use your TI-84 calculator to calculate a mean, we wanted them to be able to calculate a mean, but we also wanted them to know what they were calculating, right? It's no good to me if you go on to your next class and you know how to calculate something, but you have zero idea what it means. So we have about 2,000 students a year. We're winding up with class sizes of about 80. So we've been running, between 70 and 90 for the past few semesters. And it's what we would call a coordinated course, which means we meet together as an instructional team regularly. We have a common schedule, common grading policy, common syllabus language. We're working with evidence-based practices. We're doing some active learning in the classroom and some group work. We're using the global goals for sustainable development as an inspiration to get students drawn into statistics so that they are kind of to engender some interest in what we're trying to teach them. We're using Excel for our calculations, so they're working on their computers inside and outside of the classroom. And we're using Realize It for the application of those concepts and practicing those calculations, how to calculate the confidence interval, how to calculate the summary data for a sample. We have in each of our classrooms, we have one, they're called preceptors at our university. It's an undergraduate peer partner. So someone who's taken the course before, did well in the course, and now is helping students in the classroom. And we have migrated into active learning classrooms. So we're now working in rooms that are set up to facilitate what we're trying to accomplish in our course. So that's kind of the background of where we're all coming from in our use of Realize It and Canvas. And one of the cool things that we did that I thought you guys might be interested in is the customization of the Realize It experience by discipline. So we have our students in the first Realize It thing that they access identify themselves as they're a health science major or criminal justice, criminology, political science, kind of in that category, or whether they're psychology, sociology, anthropology, archaeology, or whether they're something entirely different. So they identify themselves, and then we differentiate the kinds of questions that we send them in Realize It. So here is an example from the same node in Realize It, but the health science student gets a question that's about blood pressure, whereas the criminal justice student gets a question that's about the cost of a felony criminal conviction. So we're kind of trying to capture their interest and tailor the questions that we're asking them so that they can clearly see that it's like somehow beneficial to them to master this material, and that they'll be bringing it forward with them into their major as they continue on. So that has been really fun. And the students respond well to it. So that's really the only thing that I wanted to share with you about what we're doing with Realize It. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about how we communicate with our students. And I use Canvas for student feedback. So Tammy, you talked a lot about interfacing with those students so that they know that we see them as a human being and not just seat, 87 in the classroom. And these are some questions that I ask every semester. So every week from my students, they get a feedback question in Canvas that should communicate something to me about what's going on with them, but also give them an opportunity to reflect on their learning and their progress through the course. So before the course, I always ask, rate your level of anxiety about this class. This was actually, the example was taken from a semester where students were pretty positive. Usually I get much higher response in the I'm anxious or I really dread this class. And then, so the first example on the left is from before the class starts. And then later on, I'll ask them to reassess. Okay, so we're a third of the way through the semester. Are you learning stuff? What have you learned about statistics? What have you learned about using Excel? And then, how do you feel about your group mates? So I personally like to share this information back to them. So later on in the week, I'll throw a slide up that's got this summary data from Canvas so that we can talk about it, so that I can say to those who are anxious about the class, look, you're not the only one who's anxious about this class. Half the class is worried about this class, so don't feel like you're alone. Showing them that, working in groups, they are, one of the reasons we put them in groups is we want them to make friends and have people to turn to when they need help. But even to say, look, most of you say, well, we're not friends, but we work well together, and talking about how important that is in the workplace. And then down the last two questions in the bottom, have you been helped by a group mate? Have you helped a group mate? That's why we do groups, so that they can practice talking through the material with one another. And I think it's good to share this information back with them so that they can see that. However, sometimes just asking is sufficient. Oh wait, I threw another one in here. So these are reflections after the test, which I think Juan is going to talk a little bit more about the reflections that you ask them to report back after their tests. I I mentioned here that this is about putting students in context. So I want them to understand how the rest of the class is feeling about some of these things. And that's why I share them back. For example, when I talk about how did the project go, in the bottom left there, and they say, you know, not great, it was graded unfairly. I want them to see that that's unusual. First of all, I know those are the people I need to reach out to, right? If you feel like you've been graded unfairly, we need to have a conversation to see, you know, if we can come to some kind of common understanding of how you're getting the grades you're getting. But also to see that that's a minority. You know, most people are feeling like they're getting graded fairly. So I do like to share this information back. And even with the open-ended questions though, and again, our course sizes, they're pretty big. No, hold on. Oh yeah, that's the one that I want. So sometimes I'm not able to go back through all of their free response questions, but just the fact that I ask them, they recognize this as me being kind of invested in how they're doing. So Tammy, you talked about giving those little 2-minute responses. The responses are, that's what we all want to do, what we all want to go for. But in some of these large enrollment classes, sometimes it's enough to just ask. And they recognize that you care about them. So that one on the very bottom there, it's not about math, but I love how much you care for your students. I mean, what I'm doing is just asking them how they're doing, which is a pretty low, it's not requiring a whole lot for me to ask the question and give them a chance to reflect on how they're doing and give them a place to complain. You know, I think a lot of our complaints are about Realize It. And somebody said, oh, again, it was Tammy, you showed where a student had said, I was really close, can I get some credit? In my course, Realize It is maybe, it's one of the very few places where you don't get just participation credit or close enough or, you know, partial credit. It pretty much grades you got that answer right or you got that answer wrong. So it's a place where students get the most frustrated because they'll be like, I was really close, or I worked on this problem for 15 minutes and I got it wrong. And I don't think that's fair because I put so much effort in, you know, even if they did get it wrong, to say, look, you know, this is the one that's going to say yes or no, right or wrong. And that is going to make it the most difficult part of your learning experience. And we're all in this together. And how can I help you get through it? This was from an anonymous feedback assignment that I gave them. So yeah, so I found Canvas to be a really great way to connect with the students in some of these larger enrollment courses where we can lose sight of the three-dimensionality of our students if we don't give them an opportunity to talk to us like this. That's really all I had to share.
All right, so I'm going to show you how I use the Canvas surveys and the gradebook and the Realize It analytics to help me to get to know my students better and to ensure them that they can stay on track and succeed in the course. Great. Can go next. So one of the first thing that I do usually in the class is I would, at the end of each test, I would provide them I would ask them to complete a post-test surveys. It would be very similar to what Ree has done, where she would gradually ask students for their feedback about the class and their feelings. So I do the same, but I usually do that at the end of, after each test, just so that they can reflect on their performance on the test and their understanding on the material so far. And it helps students to analyze their testing situations. And if they did poorly, I hope they can recognize that the way they study or prepare for the test is not working for them and is something that hopefully can open their eyes to start changing their behaviors so that they can have a greater success with future testing situations. And if they did well, I also want them to realize that it's not something that they get out of luck. It's something based on the effort that they have put in, the way they prepared and the way they approach the test. And if it's working for them, it's something that they know, okay, this is something that they can keep doing. And if it's not working, they need to either, you know, see me one-on-one so that I can advise them or give them some suggestion on what is a good study skills or study habit that they could use if they have not done before. So with the post-test surveys, hopefully they can reflect on that. Right, and these are some of the post-test survey questions that I put in. Most of the questions are open-ended, so they get to type in however they like, whether it's one sentence or a whole paragraph. So I usually would ask them which part of the test that they would recognize as the easiest for them and the most difficult for them, and see if they had read the questions thoroughly. And I would also ask them how much time they had spent studying for the test, and how early they prepared for it. Did they prepare the night before, or did they prepare days ahead? And also, I want them to realize that the test questions are very similar to the study guide that I've provided them, so that they know that that I've given them all the resources that I have to really help them to maximize their test performance, and they're getting the highest possible score if they really try, and if they really look and really try working on those practice tests. They will realize that when they compare the actual test with the practice test, they are very similar, so that in the future they know that they should not take the practice test lightly, because this is really as if it's like taking the test itself. I would also ask them what kind of questions that they would handle best, whether they like short answer questions or multiple choice questions or fill in the blank, and also ask them if the question on the test is something they expected. And at the end, I asked them what are the things that they could do differently, or the things that they could have that definitely keep going to do well or better on the next test or in the rest of the course. And these are some of the responses in one of the semesters that I got. And this is the one that I usually would share in class based on their responses. And then I would talk about it. And based on that, if I feel like they should do more of something else, or if I see that only 59%, as you can see here, 59% reviewed the study guide, which is where basically the test questions looks just like the study guide. So I wish that percentage would have been higher. So that would be something that I would brought up in class and talk about. You know, the study guide is really how I want to help you to really guide you in the right direction of how you should prepare for the test. So do not take that lightly. You should really complete that study guide treat it as if it's your actual test. So I would bring it up in class so that they're aware that that should be their first stage of studying for the test. And then after that, they can move on to the next part and looking at the notes, and then come to my office hours and then work together with their, ask each other questions in class if they forgot about things. So that's how I would talk about it in class. And then the next thing that I also do in Canvas is I would use the gradebook filtering options, where if any particular assignments is almost due, is maybe in a few days is going to be due, I would look at the students that are, had a score that is below 70s, that's in other words, not passing, or those that have not started on an assignment. So in that case, I would either me or the preceptor, I would ask the preceptor to reach out to those students individually and just remind them of the importance of those assignments, just to help them understand the content better. And with those assignments, with those solving the problems, they can get enough practice on the necessary skills for the course, which is Excel, because Excel is our main application and software to do calculations. And for most of the students, this will be their first time using it. So they definitely need a lot of practice on it. So they should work on those questions, do not skip them. So we just want to send them that reminder saying that don't do this at the last minute. If you do everything in one sitting, it's definitely is going to overwhelm you. And this thing's supposed to be done, gradually each day or every other day. So that's something that I would do once every other week, just to make them aware that, we're checking on their grades, we're checking on them. So if there's any personal issues, that's when they communicate with us and see if we can accommodate them. And this is also the email that I would send out from in Canvas, where I compose the message and set the criteria that I'm looking for. Those that score less than a certain numbers, And then I would just send out that emails to those students. And, you know, at least more than half of the students would reach out back to me, just saying that, you know, they would want to meet with me either in person or through Zoom. And when meeting with them one-on-one, that's definitely has helped them to try to find the better way to study. And most of them, sometimes they feel like they feel like when they don't know something, they're nervous to ask. So that can, my goal is to reassure them that, you know, I'm not scary, and I'm trying to be as, you know, I'm as helpful as possible. Whatever questions you have, you know, whether it was something that was done all the way back weeks ago, something that's really basic, please ask, because these things will build up from one to the next. So I always trying to make them feel that whatever issues that you have, please reach out. I'm here to help. I'm here to kind of take you from one step to the next, or I'm here to trying to get you out of whatever situation that you're stuck on in this class. So you gotta ask for help, and I'm waiting for you guys to come and help, to get help from me. And also, other than looking at each specific assignments that was due or almost due, I would also look at their current overall grade, and then through the gradebook filterings, I would do the similar way when I would reach out to students who are currently not at a passing grade. And then same thing, I would advise them of what they need to be doing, and ask them to meet with me, whether it's via Zoom or in person. And just to tell them that this is not like your set in stone grade, it's that you can really turn things around. Just to tell them, like, you can still pass, you can still get at least a C or even better than a C if you really do something about it right now. It's not too late. So I always giving them that hope that they can still change things around. And with that, they feel like they want to meet and try harder, try to change their fate. And through Realizeit Analytics, I was able to review students' progress by topics. And then on each of the topic, I get to see which specific problems that they struggle on by each lesson. And I can also see which student that have not started. If it's almost due, we would reach out to those students just to remind them, like, sometimes a topic would have 4 sub lessons or 4 lessons. So we want to remind them that, hey, there are 5 lessons in this topic, and you have until tomorrow to do it. So you should get started as soon as possible, because if you have to do all of this in one sitting, it can be very, very overwhelming. So we're trying to remind them that, you know, there are a lot of lessons that they need to cover in that one module topic. So we want to make sure they're aware of that. And for those who have not started as well. And also, we want to look at those students that have, based on their emoji, those that says that they're feeling anxious, confused, or frustrated. We want to reach out to those, see if what are they frustrated about. Is it something about just the way Realizeit wants the answers, like rounding issues? Usually is the most things that students have are frustrated about. And if they're confused, we want to know what topic or lesson that they're confused about. And if they're anxious, we also want to know what they're anxious about. So we trying to reach out to those students, trying to get their personal thoughts and feedbacks, and see what can we do to make their learning experience better. And also we want to hear their problem. And the goal is to eventually help them to get through the course, and by actually with their own effort. And we are just a medium to help them get there. And by looking at all this data, it helped me to see the big picture of how the whole class was doing, for example, on a test or any particular topic, lessons or quizzes. So that helped me to see how students are doing overall, and any questions that most students got it wrong, I would talk about it in class and discuss about it. So it happens when we do poll everywhere questions, for example, in class, when most of the class got the answer wrong, I would talk about it. I would work out those problems so that they see what they're supposed to do instead. And it's also helped me to reflect students' challenges, because the students' challenges, they are valid. So I will always not acknowledge that I understand the struggle. I understand that, you have other things to do as well, other than just this class. So I know that, it's not easy for you to navigate and to juggle around everything. And anything that you are stuck on can definitely hinder your performance for the future. So it helps me to reflect also how I could do differently as a teacher. How could I maybe change the way I explain things? So I always try to prepare myself with different kinds of explanations, so that, if one way doesn't work, I always have something as a backup just to prepare to explain it to them, so that it can clear any confusions or misconceptions that they may have. And with those feedbacks on the polls, on the surveys, I would share with the class. And based on their feedback on, I also ask them, what can I do as a professor differently to help them succeed in this class? So sometimes if I'm going too fast, or if I'm going too slow, or if they feel like they need me to have more class activities, or they want me to give more examples. So I would like to hear that from them. So with that feedback, if it's something doable for that semester, I would tell them, okay, I heard you that you need this and that, and I'm gonna start doing that from now on. And if their request is something that I cannot implement in that current semester, I will tell them, okay, here's why I can't do it right now, but this is something that I will think about moving forward in the future semesters. So I want them to feel that, it's that we take this survey not just for the sake of, making it look all nice and organized in Canvas, but we also read your feedback and we respond to it, so that students know that this is not just something that we do just because it's something that we really want to learn more about them. Okay, and I think that's all for me. I'm going to pass it on to, I think, Yanchma. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. I want to be aware of our time, and Jennifer is not here. So I think, Ree, do you want to just touch really quickly on these slides?
I can. So these are just the tools that Jennifer was saying that she uses a lot in Canvas, and some of these have already been mentioned. So that the analytics menu, when you look at the topic by activity, and you get those peaks, that's where you see, and again, it's interesting. I notice patterns that I saw in your data where we'll have a really tough week followed by everybody's burnout and they don't do anything. And then another tough week followed by, so that's an interesting thing for us to think about how to deal with that moving forward. How do we spread this out a little bit better? She also uses a topic by date, which is the lower graph, which is interesting. You can see the diagonal there as students are progressing through the course. Usually they're working on the material they're supposed to be working on. But as you give them opportunities to go back and revise things, they're also going back to revise things as they go through. So that's a pretty cool tool that we have access to see how they're working, when they're working. Here you can see, oh, good. I'm glad there's a picture of this. This other/unsure emoji is maybe my favorite thing on the planet. It's just two eyeballs. And sometimes I feel that way in my classes too. So Jennifer captured a screenshot there. So she's using the student menu as well to use the drop down to go to may need intervention. So she's looking for the people who are falling behind and Realize It, and letting them do the analytical processing of who is where and how they're doing. In these large enrollment courses that Realize It can just say, here are the ones, go after them. So she's going after them. And then, as you contact them, you can figure out where it is exactly they're struggling, and you can contact them and say, hey, I see you're really having a hard time with, this and this topic. How can we help you? Here are our preceptors' office hours. Here's my office hours. Do we need to talk about this in class? Along those lines. So then the question she's answering, what's the value of looking at this data? Analytics menu shows how quickly and how much time is being spent on topics. If students are getting off track, if they're starting things on time, these are things you can address in class. Allowing class time for topics that the students struggle with most. So having taught this class several semesters in a row, I have a pretty good idea beforehand where they're gonna struggle, but every now and then you catch something that is specific to the class you're working with that, well, wow, I'm surprised, but these guys seem to be really having a problem with this topic. Let's go in and talk about it. So I think that's useful as well. And how do you share with your students to help them know that you know? So Jennifer said that she or her TA will contact the ones that they need intervention. And then in class, I do a quick class survey to see how many ran into issues with, how many ran into, whatever the topic is on Realize It. Let's do a couple of examples together. So using the analytics that are provided by Realize It to change what you're doing in the classroom, right? To focus on the things that people are struggling with and maybe spend less time on the things that people tend to do, that people are doing really well with.
Right, thank you. And by when, I guess we can stop sharing screen and we'll have just about 9 minutes to hear any questions or comments or last minute ideas as you look at how everyone's using analytics.
So I just have 2 comments quickly. Anne and I, the way the scores are delivered to the grade book, it is at the due date, but then it's 2 a.m. Every day, the next day. And what we have found in our case is that most of the time the students are working to the due date, like they bear that due date in mind. And when they're going back, it is in a lot of cases solely to practice. Every now and then we'll have a student who, needs more time. And so that's a little cushion for them. But I was concerned at the beginning that maybe because they had that information, they would delay it or wait till the last minute. But luckily that, and we've been doing this now over the course of I think more than about 6 semesters. So that's a good thing. And then, I'm going to take a page out of Juan's book and start filtering these students in Canvas, and sending another message, because another thing that I'm finding particularly about, it's different now over the 20 years that I've been teaching. But these students, I used to think, oh, well, if I'm reaching out, it might be bothering them. But what I'm finding with this particular, group of students or this wave is you can't message them too much. They like it. I mean, I'm sure there's one that is there that's again, another an announcement every day or not. And these are conversations that Anne and I have frequently too, about the number of announcements we post. It used to be just once a week, here's what you have to do. And now, the amount of reassurance. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm messaging them and Realize It, and I'm messaging them in the inbox, and they have their announcement, and I'm posting here and I'm posting there. And I'm thinking, well, here's another way to message, all of them at once. So anyway, I'm gonna take that and put it in my bag of tricks too. So thank you, Juan, for mentioning that.
I did have one student one time say, it's kind of freaking me out. It's like you're watching me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And when I need to tell them that they need to spend more time, because I'll go and I'll check how many minutes they've spent or how much time they've spent after they tell me they really bombed something. I try not to sound like Big Brother, but then they do realize, I think a lot of them appreciate it, but I think that they're not understanding. We keep trying to tell them, when you took a face-to-face class and you had a hard copy textbook, you didn't hopefully spend only 5 minutes in the textbook for the entire chapter, right? So this is the same thing. You need to spend, and we tell them in the syllabus, it says, and we reiterate it in announcements and things, that how many hours per unit they're expected to spend. And it's also a 4-credit course. So I also will remind them of that and say, this is a 4-credit course. It's not, anyway. So yeah, I try not to sound too much like I'm spying on them, But back to Casey's point about leaving everything open from day one. And then we do have the due dates for the work that then goes to the Canvas gradebook. But unlike one of the participants here, we do give them the opportunity to increase their score if they do it, and they know that if they revise, their score might lower. But since we have so many students who come to the table with some level of previous knowledge of the content, which might be true in a lot of classes, I don't want to, like, I want to have things open, and I want them to be able to go back, because also I recognize their lives are really busy. And I was worried at the beginning about doing it this way, because I thought students would either, you know, do everything in the first month and maybe hire someone to do it for them, or they would not do any of the work because they knew they could go back even after the deadline. But we're not finding that happening. It's very, very rare that a student doesn't, you know, adhere to those deadlines, even though they know they can go back.
Well, and I find that I'm pushing them to go back and to repeat material.
Yes, me
because
too.
There's such a finality of a deadline that they're like,
Yeah.
well,
I'm
it's
constantly
over,
telling
you know,
them.
and it's like, it's not over.
Yeah, the deadline is only to keep you on track. But back to my comment about students who, what they bring to the table, there's so many students in Florida who already know some Spanish. So in terms of keeping everything open from day one, all the lessons, all the content, all the assignments, all the quizzes, all the projects, I don't want to penalize a student who's done determined knowledge, has gone through and maybe was able to finish something quicker than another student, or then that student themselves can finish in a different lesson because of their prior knowledge. So that's another reason we keep everything open from day one.
And
except
just
for
a disclaimer-
assessments,
Yeah.
there are due dates and those are set in stone. They can't go back.
And I would say, for a disclaimer, like for Ann and I's courses specifically being fully online, I think it's different when you have, you know, when you're in the classroom. But if a student is fully online, or they're, which is the case a lot of times at UCF, a fully online student, meaning that all of their courses are online, since they don't have the parameters of a class time to attend, they're planning their life in other ways. So in particular, I had a conversation assignment due last Friday. A student indicated that she was going on a cruise and no one in her group had spoken to her. And so she said, if I'm on the cruise and I can't connect, or I can't, you know, and so just, it seems like, but these are the kinds of things that we have to adapt around, because if they're only taking our class or all of the classes are online, then these are going to be, you know, and so having that flexibility, it's something that I will say as a recovering control freak that I've had to kind of like let go a little bit with these online classes.
Yeah, and a lot of them take online classes because they have to. You know, I have a student, you know, many of my students work full time. Many of them have families. Many of them are taking care of family members. And so I have to try to be a little more flexible, not letting them get away with stuff, so to say. But I believe that if we're going to allow online teaching and learning, we have to also kind of change our view of you know, that rigidity. I mean, they have to stand task and they have to be held accountable, but I'm a little more flexible.
Yeah, I used to be super rigid. And, you know, last semester, 32% of my students worked 40 hours or more a week. And I used to give 2 options. You can take your test at this time or at this time. And now I have it opens at Tuesday at 10 a.m. and it closes on Thursday at 11:59 p.m.
Yeah, we do something similar. It's open for a 48-hour window.
Yeah. They're like, some of our teachers in online give us a week. And I'm like, sorry, it's not happening.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. Actually, that was before we started having everything open from day one. Sorry. But all assessments, even assessments, are open from the very first day of the semester.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? They're not going ahead and doing them ahead of time. They're not. They're staying on track with the calendar.
I'm sort of into risky behaviors, and I told Ann that I was going to try that one summer, and it was so successful. And so I said, I'm going to do it again in the fall. Do you want to do it too? You know, and it was like,
it works really well. And
both just,
I'd be willing to bet a lot of them don't even know they're open from day one, even though we tell them over and over.
They're so focused on that to-do list in Canvas that you know.
Yeah, that's the thing, that to-do list. I would throw out, I think one of the things about having the face-to-face classes that, and particularly these kind of inquiry-led, group work scenarios that we set up for them, if they come into class and they haven't done the stuff yet, they're not prepared for those activities. So that's I think maybe a reason that we try to enforce those deadlines. My students know that when they first come in, they think there's a deadline, so it closes, they can't access Realize It anymore. I open it back up again as soon as they ask, and then right before the test. And so by the second test, they know they have access to it all the time, that I'm not gonna, but in the beginning, I try to train them, oh, you have to do this before the deadline, but then they start to realize that the deadline keeps shifting. I don't know, that works for us, but it's always that tough thing of how much control do you give them and how much do you need them to have stuff done on time.
And also for our class being statistics and all, because they need to understand that certain information before they come into class. And then when we do the activities in class, they have to know those things. So we do want them to get those done within a certain timeline.
Yeah.
So that when they come to class, when we had to do this activity, do you know how to calculate this? We talk about in the video was explained on that, so that we can talk about more difficult stuff in class. So when students, they don't prepare with that, then that will have that gap on their learning experience. So that's something that I guess that's why we had that deadlines on them. But for my sections, I give them that I give them a 5-day grace period after that Realize It assignment is due. So when it's due, Realize It will send their score back to Canvas. So if they have not started anything by that due date, they will get it. They will see a 0 in their Canvas gradebook. But because I give them that additional 5 days to catch up, so that's like my way of giving them that leniency of not, like you said, not being a control freak, like you have to get it done by this date or, no matter what. So that initial due date, just to open their eyes, if they realize they had a 0, then they know I got 5 more days to improve my scores. And then by that due date, we have already talked a lot about that topic. So it should not be any reason why they, can't get started on that assignments. So they already had watched the videos, they already had the text in Realize It. And with that, and then also in addition to that, we also talk about it in class in more depth. So by that due date, and then they have 5 more days, they should be able to get those done pretty quickly if they really get to it.
Yeah, and I'll say for our courses too, like each module or we don't really have chapters anymore because we use open educational resources, and we've kind of created within Realize It, kind of curated what's delivered to them in the learning content. And they're again in 3-week sets, but the Realize It due date is on the Friday of the very first week. So the idea is that they've already worked through all of the content for that entire module, so that when they get to the assignments in the second week and the third week, which are a little more high stakes, a writing assignment, a conversation assignment, a culture assignment, that they've already been through in theory all of the content for that module. So it's not even, the due date's not at the end of the 3 weeks, it's like out of the gate. And we don't really assign anything else that first week, except for one quick knowledge check in Canvas where we can give them feedback to make sure as they move through the higher stakes assignments in the next 2 weeks that they're on, the right track, and that they have kind of a wake up call if they're not doing well to either reach out to us or spend more time, within the learning content and doing the practice and Realize It.
I think that's good. That's a great thing.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing what you're doing and all the great things that are happening in your virtual classrooms and face-to-face classrooms. And this is really what Kiran and I wanted to have a space for faculty to share, particularly another institution like you're from UCS, we're from UNC Charlotte, and we're both using Realize It, right? And so to see some of the benefits of those learning analytics is really wonderful. And we want to keep envisioning what this might look like So if you have ideas, please share them with Bywin or reach out to us. What I hope is that we can share the slide decks with one another. I took some notes. This was maybe Kieran's idea that we sort of had these like 3 bullet points. So like Tammy, I wrote 3 bullet points of what you said, just sort of a quick, this is how you're using those analytics. I did that for everybody. And I took some notes on a few of the conversations you had. Like, I think the big brother thing is really important to think about. And maybe some faculty at your institution at UCF would enjoy talking about that more. And I'm sure UNC Charlotte faculty would enjoy talking about that more. So what I hope is we can share the recording, the slide decks, and then these notes with everyone. And then you feel free to share them within your institutions, at your units, your teams, however you'd like to. So yeah, thank you everyone for participating and being a part of this.
Thank you, Heidi. This sounds like a great plan. As soon as the video is ready, I'm going to share that with you, and then also our PowerPoint as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for staying.